What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Serious Angler podcast, Tuesday Night Live, powered by our friends over at X2. And as you can see, tonight it is I, the captain, Andrew Foll, all by himself. Bailey is running amok down in Alabama with the X2 guys doing some filming, maybe a special podcast coming, a little prelude there for you. And I think he's hanging out with like Wes Logan, Hunter Shryock, Justin Atkins, and a few other guys. And rumor has it that jacked some fish today on Neely Henry. So I'm excited for him to talk about that once he gets back here to New York. But some news here. Adam Deacon, Business from the Bass Boat host. You noticed yesterday that there was not a Business from the Bass Boat episode, and that was for good cause. He was up there in Idaho fishing the ABA Team Trail Championship Regional, which was on Coeur d'Alene, I do believe is how you pronounce the lake. And I believe he finished second. And then there was another tournament the final day to fish for a boat. I don't think he did so well there, but congrats to Deacon for a really good finish up there in the Pacific Northwest. And I myself fished a really big Canadian smallmouth tournament over the weekend. Didn't go the way I wanted it to. We caught a ton of fish. Our practice was stellar. We fished for like an hour on Friday and had almost 20 pounds with a big 5-pounder, which is a really big fish for the Upper Niagara. And on Saturday, we had 16 and change in the boat in the first like half hour, and then we just couldn't get a big bite once the sun came out. It was a dang shame. I had really high hopes for it. We finished 32nd out of 100, which had just about every big stick in it from Canada in my region of Ontario, right across the border, like not like the Johnston brothers or anything like that, but guys like Paul Castellano, Babazumi, and just general big names on that side of the border. But tonight we have a really awesome show for you. We have Louis Monetti coming on, who is the College Classic bracket champion, which is a huge feat, and he also qualified for the Bassmaster Classic. So without further ado, let's get Louis on here and learn about his story a little bit. What's going on, man? How you doing?
What's going on, dude? I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah. Oh, first, I'm pretty good. First of all, I want to say congratulations on the giant victory. That had to have been like a huge relief, and I would assume a childhood dream of yours.
Yeah, no, I mean, a relief. Honestly, that is one of the better ways to put it. And a dream. I mean, that's something that I don't think will set in for a little while, but it absolutely is. But no, going back to it being a relief, dude, it totally is because, you know, as I'm sure we'll get into, I kind of planned on pursuing some sort of a career in fishing for a while now. And obviously that comes with the price tag of the opens and a boat and a truck and the whole nine. So to have won that tournament and know that that's kind of going to be covered for at least next year is just a huge relief, honestly.
Yeah, I wonder if Mercer will announce as you walk onto that classic stage, Bassmaster Classic was a College Classic bracket champion.
Yeah,
So that's a big deal, man. Best
it
of the
is.
best.
And it's a mouthful. That's
Yeah.
one thing that
It is a mouthful. My tongue definitely got twisted.
the title is a mouthful. It's kind of tough. I don't know if they could shorten it to just bracket or I don't know, college bracket or something. But no, yeah, it is awesome.
I don't know if you can see the comments on the screen, but Chris Flay said, please do not change the seats in your boat.
I'm not planning on it.
And we're going to talk about the Ranger 96 here in, the 96 Ranger here in a little bit. But before we get too much into the tournament itself of the College Classic bracket, tell the viewers about yourself, who Louis Monetti is, where you grew up, your tournament fishing history, even just general fishing history, where you started, who taught you, why, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I grew up in Brielle, New Jersey. It's a little like kind of sea town in New Jersey on the coast there, kind of central Jersey. And I got into fishing when I was super young, probably like most of us. You know, I was 3-4 years old. But always saltwater. You know, I grew up just fishing stripers and blues, and my dad had a boat, and we go out and catch everything. I was just addicted to it, and yeah, it was all I wanted to do. when I was probably 11 or 12 years old, one of my buddies, Gavin, who's like a high school buddy of mine, or not high school, grade school buddy of mine. He's like, dude, you gotta try out bass fishing, which to me at the time felt like the lamest thing on planet Earth. Like I wanted no part in it. He finally convinced me to get out, and I was just hooked by it. By the time, I mean, a year or two later, I started, working on figuring out how to get into like youth tournaments and kind of the youth fishing scene. I see my buddy Trevor in there. I actually fished my first tournament out of his boat.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and now I don't mean to cut you off here, but
No.
like central New Jersey, right? Is that like Lake Hopatcong area? So is that like
So
a
it's
home lake for you?
no. So that's Trevor's home lake.
Yeah. See?
I grew up probably about an hour and 45 south of there.
Okay.
So Central Jersey, it's nothing but small little like kind of ponds, honestly. Like 100 to 300 acre ponds, and then a couple of reservoirs that are still no more bigger than, I don't know, 500-600 acres. All electric only. That whole deal. That's kind of what I grew up fishing. And it kind of set me up to be who I am as a fisherman. Fishing those kind of small places, you learn to fish around people. You learn how to get more bites than I guess you learn how to get bites behind people. You learn how to fish comfortably around people, and I'm kind of a finessey fish for bites instead of and quantity of bites instead of the big bite. And I think just fishing in that area definitely like kind of grew me to that. From there though, I fished high school for 1 year. It was kind of in its youth in Jersey. It was only the first year or two that Jersey had high school fishing. Made the high school national championship and completely sucked on Kentucky Lake. It was like a whole different world to me.
Yeah, we could
Um,
talk about that for a second. There was what, like 300 boats in those Kentucky Lake Derbies,
yeah,
and it would always go to somebody who lived on Kentucky Lake, and they would blow the doors off of everyone else for like 7 years in a row.
yeah. No, I think there was I could be wrong on this, but I believe there were 320 boats in the in the natty that I fished.
So we're going from little ponds to basically hundreds of thousands of acres in
Yeah.
body and dangers, shell bars, rock bars that you have to beware of. That's just intimidating in itself.
Yeah, it was a very eye-opening experience, and I think it kind of led me to do what I wanted to do in fishing, which was go and fish in college and kind of figure out the southern deal. By the time I was in like later high school, I joined the Bass Nation in New Jersey, kind of toured me around some of the bigger bodies of water in the region. Um, you know, Chesapeake Bay, Potomac River, Oneida Lake, Champlain, just a whole bunch of different places. And so I kind of got a taste for those bigger bodies of water. And then as I got older, I got a boat and went and fished all these places and actually ended up building a really like close, I guess, relationship with the St. Lawrence River. It's to this day my favorite place on planet Earth. But anyways, that experience on Kentucky Lake really kind of drove me to want to go down south and figure out just southern fishing because it was completely different to me. And I ended up going to UNC Charlotte and fished for 4 years, and kind of here we are.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. So saltwater. It's funny that you talk about like the saltwater to bass stuff, right? Like the shoreline. Usually, it's the opposite direction. Bass guys go to saltwater, then they're completely ruined. But you flip the switch, which is pretty neat. So then you went down to college in Carolina, right? Like that's
Yeah.
where it is. The 49ers, I believe, is a Carolina school. I know a little bit. I've read some on you. I'll be blatantly honest. Like I was more intrigued by the tournament and
Yeah.
how that goes, and that's what we're going to be talking about. But was that it's not Coastal Carolina, is it?
No,
49ers? No.
so UNC Charlotte.
Got it. Okay. Sorry. my ignorance there. I apologize on it.
No
But yeah,
worries.
so you go from New Jersey to Carolina and become a college fishing basically phenom at this moment because you won the tournament, right? So let's talk about your college fishing days here. Now that you're graduated out of college, you're on to the next step of life. So this is basically your last college tournament that you won. We're going to be
Mhm.
diving into that. But let's talk about your college tournament history real fast before we go forward.
Yeah, so, to answer, I see a question in comments. I have not fished the classic water, so nobody give me any tips. I can't take them.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, so the college fishing phenom part, although I do appreciate the notion, it took until the last tournament I fished to get to that. Um, I definitely started off I don't wanna say started off slow. The first, college bass tournament, like BASS, that I fished, I actually top 10. But I kinda had an interesting college career. My first year my first 3 years, I fished alone, qualified for 2 bass national championships and 1 FLW, I think, and I still refer to it as FLW regardless of what the people say.
Yeah, I find myself doing that too. And don't get me wrong, the BPT Major League Fishing are doing some incredible things on the conservation side. It's
Yeah,
just for me, everything was always BASS and FLW, Fishing
I
League Worldwide.
I
And
couldn't agree more.
it'll always resonate to me to that side. Growing up watching both of them on TV, like
Yeah.
at 8, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, it's just where it's stuck. And then, yeah. So, do you want to dive into the tournament now?
Yeah, no, we absolutely can.
Yeah. So, well, actually, yeah, let's dive into the tournament. Day practice, right? So,
Yeah.
how did practice go for you during the Derby?
So, it was interesting. Kinda going into it so we won Michael and I, who's in the chat, my boy, we won team of the year this year, and that's what qualified us for the bracket.
Congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you. But last year was the first year that team of the year qualified for the bracket, and then this year the second, obviously. So we qualified and kind of went to the national championship on Winyah Bay, whatever. But we had to stick around until the final day of the national championship because that was when the other competitors would be announced, the top three from the national championship. And then they would tell that we had like a mini meeting there on day three. This is where the bracket's going to be. This is what you need to know, yada, yada. So they announced to us that it was going to be on Greenwood. Glenn Kale. He's the youth nation director, college, high school, and youth for Bass these days. And yeah, so he announced that it was on Lake Greenwood. And I was kind of psyched. And I kind of feel like everyone maybe thought that it was because I was the UNC Charlotte guy, local. I'd fished it. I'd never seen the place before. And that was why I was excited. Um, when I think about, fall fishing, I think about kind of tough, fishing the moment, kind of fishing what's in front of you and all of that. So when I figured out there was somewhere I'd never been, I was honestly psyched because I feel like there's no better way to fish that way than to never have seen the place you're going to fish.
Yeah. So you can basically just broke down the map like in pre-practice and be like, these are all the high percentage areas on this lake. And if I put high percentage bite baits in front of them, I'm probably going to get bit if there's a good population of bass. Is probably the way you were thinking going into it, I'm assuming.
So kinda.
Yeah,
Um,
fair.
basically, what I kinda did is I looked at the lake and my previous Carolina fishing experience kinda leads me to the bottom end of lakes. I don't know if it's partially because I have a small boat and I'm never able to run to the top end of lakes or what really it is, but I like fishing clean water. Like I said, coming from the north and having like a smallmouth background, I always like fishing clean water. It's where I feel the most comfortable. And typically, the bottom ends of these Carolina lakes is where you find that. On top of that, just from tournaments and watching a lot of tournaments and fishing a bunch of tournaments in the area, I've kind of found that the biggest fish in these Carolina dammed impoundments with no current tend to be at the bottom end of the lakes. Now, they're oftentimes the hardest to catch because of the clear water, and a lot of times the ramps on these lakes are down near the bottom, so that's where fish that are either
The
caught or
most
pressured the
pressured.
most. Yeah. So I always just feel most comfortable down there because it just kind of sets up for me. And then on top of that, I really tried to stay away from the lake as far as studying. I kind of had a feeling I would stay towards there, but just because of weather and all that, I really, really didn't want to focus on it. And then when we heard that the hurricane was coming through, Hurricane Ian, it was supposed to hit us a lot harder than it did. But when it kind of was evident that it was going to come through, I knew that the bottom end was where I needed to stay, just from the potential of the top end blowing out and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's smart. Very smart.
Hmm.
So what keyed you into the baits that you threw on day one through your practice? And then
Yeah.
we'll jump right into day one if you want to take it away from there.
Yeah, no, so my practice, I'll dive into practice a little bit just because it's kind of interesting how I approached it. It's going to make me sound really smart, but if it didn't work out, it could have sounded it could sound really stupid. Um, so in
We're
practice,
fishermen. We have stories to tell, right? And they all
exactly.
make us sound really smart or dumb. So
Yes.
it's the way it goes. It's the most humbling sport and the most gratifying sport that we can choose to do.
It,
So
yeah.
let's talk about practice.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You couldn't have put it any better. But yeah, so practice was interesting because same reasons as how I kind of approached the week of and where I was going to fish, that storm was coming. And as of that practice day, I think it was Thursday, there's supposed to be Thursday practice day, Friday seeding day, and then day one Saturday. Seeding day ended up being canceled, but not till the morning of. So we didn't know we wouldn't have seeding day. But the hurricane was really supposed to hit on Friday, and it kind of really didn't, but it was supposed to hit hard. So the way I approach practice is after about the first 2 hours, it's, you know what, I'm not going to let it bite shallow, and I don't want to go around and try and figure out the shallow bite because this storm is going to turn it upside down. Whatever is going on shallow, whether it be from rainwater coming in or wind muddying up banks or whatever the case may be, I just want to stay away from the shallow bite because I didn't want to be deterred by something that wasn't happening in practice that the storm turned upside down. So I totally stayed away from it, and I graphed a lot at deep, which is totally weird to me and something I don't do often. Um, and I did that just because I felt like those would be the most stable fish. And being that there's a bunch of small spotted bass in the lake, I felt like it could be something that if I figured out something deep, I would have kind of a nerve cooling, confidence boosting small limit to start with. So going into day one, that was kind of my whole plan. Was to just go shallow or I'm sorry, go deep, get a limit, go shallow, burn the bank, see what happened. Really just fish the conditions, fish the moment. Um, so what ended up happening is I'm I'm running down the lake to, kind of one of the first areas I want to start, and running down the lake and kind of like get a glimpse out of my eye. And being a Carolina guy, I know about fall fishing and fall green light fishing. And if you're not from the Carolinas or haven't spent some time down here, fish maybe at night some, you might not know about it. But in the fall, green lights are what you want. Whether you're night fishing, whether it's a starting spot, whatever it is. And I happened to spot one out of the corner of my eye running down the lake. Did a 180, went over there and caught two solid keepers right off the bat. So that was kind of like that was honestly, that was my nerve settler. Like,
Hmm.
have two, I mean, one was I think a pound and a half, the other a pound and 3/4. And for Greenwood at that time of the year, that was like better than average, solid start.
It's like
Um,
gold.
yeah, honestly, catching a better than pound and a half fish was like trivial at times. So
Hmm.
that was really an awesome start. And then I ended up going out offshore, dragging around with a Carolina rig for probably 2 or 3 hours. Filled out my limit with tiny ones, hit the bank, and almost instantly caught a 4 pounder, 4 pound largemouth. Caught it on a V twin buzz bait that we make at Biz Baits True South. It was kind of an awesome fish catch. If you haven't seen the live footage, it's sick. And then kind of meddled around the rest of the day and noticed that the buzzbait bite wasn't what I thought it would be. I had a lot of fish kind of grabbing the tail, just not getting the bait good. And in the last 2 hours, I ended up switching to a little Whopper Plopper 90 and getting 2 really solid culls. And kind of really felt good going into day 2 because of that.
Yeah, that's quite the adjustment too, noticing that they were just biting the buzzbait a little off and be like, you know what? Let me go to a Whopper Plopper, which is a treble hook bait, to where if they do slap at it, you have a better hookup possibility. Now, when they got the plopper, were they hooked like on the outside of the mouth because they were coming up and basically pushing it, or do they actually get it with
Yeah,
that bait
so
adjustment?
those 2 at the end of the day, they did not have it great. Like, they definitely I don't know if it was because they were missing or what, but it seemed like they were trying to eat it, like the aggressive blow-ups and the whole 9, but they just weren't getting it in their mouth. Just like you said, kinda side of the face, and that's exactly what my thought process was, maybe a couple of these fish, even if it's half of them that are kinda blowing up on this buzzbait so hard, and I mean, like, crushing that thing, and I'm reeling it and just never feeling any tension. Like, the bait goes under, the blow up is huge, and I'm reeling that buzzbait and nothing ever happens. So that kind of keyed me into exactly what you said. Treble hooks, maybe a couple of these fish that are slapping at it I can hook. And I think I went like 2 for 3 on bites the rest of the day in the last hour. And that really I felt super confident about that bait day 2.
Yeah, and that day 2 was like the arrived day, right? Like, you blew it out of the water. You caught 16 pounds, 14 ounces.
Yeah.
It's almost 17-pound bag in the Carolinas in like late September, early October, fall. Like, that's incredible. Like, was it
It
all on the plopper because of that like minor adjustment?
So it was interesting. That day 2 was just a special day. I was it was cool enough. I had a bunch of my buddies come down and follow me around all the whole tournament, and we all kind of got off the water. And they announced you're moving on tomorrow, and it was big. It was awesome. And we all a couple of my buddies got together and looked at each other and were like, whatever happened out there, it was just special. Like, just one of those days. Excuse me. But the day, it didn't start off great. I started off on that green light, didn't catch, I think got one tiny one. And started just burning bank with that plopper, and for some reason missed 1 or 2 and thought to myself, okay, maybe I need to go back to that buzzbait. Maybe they'll eat it better. Threw that thing out there, had one do the same thing, and it looked like a big one, and I was just kind of beat. And I'm going further down this one bank, lose like a 3-pounder on the plopper. Like, it was a mess the first hour.
You could have been a head case. Your tournament could have been over at that point. So
Yeah.
how did you persevere through that little bit of a dilemma you were dealing with in that first like hour of the Derby?
Yeah, no, I was like kind of shook. Especially because I had changed the trebles on that thing the night before, just so that like super like make as much sure of the slap at fish getting in the boat as possible. So I sat down, changed out the trebles again, and ran across the lake. I've been doing this now for a couple of years, where if something happens, if it's a bad start, or even halfway through the day something's up, and I'm noticing, finding myself in a bad headspace, I'll just make a run. Like, doesn't matter where. It could be somewhere I know, it could be somewhere I don't know. I just make a run, just like a head clearing, restart, push the button, kind of let's go. So I make a quick little run, just like right across the lake with like a 1.5 pounder in the boat, and almost instantly catch a 6-pounder. It's like,
there's never anybody who is mad while driving a bass boat. So like that did kudos to you, like that. And that's an important part, right? Like, if you're having a mental, not like a mental breakdown or a mental issue, but you're just having a mentally challenging day or situation that happens while you're on the water, sometimes having just that subtle reset, and what it takes to reset your mind, could be such an advantage that nobody really talks about while tournament fishing, because it's such a mentally strong game, right? Like any little thing breaking off a big one, your day could have been ruined. But you adjusted and ran across the lake and caught a 6-pounder. Dude, that's awesome. Continue, because I want to hear about the rest of this day too.
Yeah, no, and even before I get into it, I kind of want to elaborate on your point. I don't know if it's just because of, my resources and having the old boat and I'm honestly, like, to be as honest as possible, I'm not an incredibly great technical fisherman. I don't think, actually, if you watch the live, I'm not a great caster. Uh, my equipment's far from top notch. So I've kind of had to and been forced to, and not only that, but just like a true believer in the mental side. I think it's the biggest side of fishing, like, wholeheartedly. I think simply knowing what you're doing, having confidence in what you're doing, and keeping your head in the right place, I think is far more important than anything else. Because I will tell you right now, from a technical standpoint, from an understanding electronics standpoint, and a lot of other different parts of fishing, I was far from, if not bottom 25% of anglers in this field. Um, but I really do feel like I really figured out kind of how to approach tournament from the mental side, and I think it's just been huge for my tournament success.
Yeah.
So to get back into day two, I catch that 6-pounder. You kind of hit the reset button, catch that big one on the plopper, and this one, thank the Lord.
Got it good.
Got it.
You're
I
like,
grabbed that
thank
thing.
God at that point. Like,
Yeah. I leaned into that thing. She jumped, kind of crapped myself about how big the fish was. She jumps again, and the bait is just nowhere to be seen. And I was like, just the biggest relief. Get that thing in the boat, and it's just down there. It was an amazing moment. And it just, talk about going from, down in the depths to just complete flip the script. I was riding my high horse, feeling confident. And what it really did for me is it kind of enforced that, I'm going to stay shallow all day, forget those 1.25 pound deep fish. We're going to stay shallow all day and just run banks and kind of see what happens. And I actually went probably half hour, 45 minutes without another bite or without another keeper bite. And then turned a corner off the bank I was fishing and broke off like a 4-pound largemouth under a dock. So it was like, at this point, I'm sitting there, my buddies are behind me. I got 2 in the boat for 7.5 pounds. And I'm going, dude, I should be done. Like, we should be done fishing today. But I think just having that giant fish in there and knowing that even if I filled out a limit with 1.5 pound, 1.25 fish, I'd have a solid chance at fishing the next day. And I never worried. My mindset stayed clear all day. Went around a corner, caught a 4-pounder, and it was like, okay, like, we're just rolling now. I caught that one on a chatterbait, weirdly enough. I was really just, like, kind of what I was saying earlier, just fishing the conditions. If I pulled up, and I was just putting the trolling motor down and going too. Like, I wasn't, there
you
was
were just
no
fishing off your gut. Like, you're like, oh, I need to set this down, pick this up, and I'm probably going to get bit. And then you did.
Yeah.
Because of what was going on. Yeah.
Exactly. And like I said, I just put trolling motor down and just went. Like, before I put that 6-pounder to about 3 hours later, I don't think I picked up the trolling motor. Like, I just went with the creeks, fished the main lake pocket, fished a creek, fished a point, like, just
covering.
went. Yeah.
Just covering.
And I think because of the fall and, this time of the year on a Carolina lake, like, dude, they're so scattered. It's so random that just doing that, just, I don't know, you run into fish. And you'll go 30 docks without a bite, and then you'll get 2 bites. So it's just kind of staying in that mental space where, I'm confident I'm going to catch fish. I had a little bit of like starting to worry right before we had this mandatory midday break at 11. I think I was still sitting on 3 for 11 pounds, which was about what you needed every day. But I was like, I need to fill out this limit. Luckily, went in the back of the pocket right before the break, filled out the limit with 2-pound-1/4 fish, and kind of was rolling after that. I just really kind of kept my head down, stayed committed. And at the very end of the day, probably 15 minutes to go, caught a 3.5 on the plopper, back of a pocket. And yeah, it was a special day. Just a meant to be day. I felt like I should have had like 21.
Yeah, or more, right? For
Yeah.
based on what you're saying. So I have a interesting question here for you,
Yeah.
right? As we're going through here. At the beginning of the show, you said that you're like a finessey fisherman, which resonates a ton with offshore fishermen. But
Hmm.
for some of the viewers here who don't know, your 96 Ranger only has one graph on it, right? At the console, not even a bow graph. So as I'm sitting here listening to you talk about day one and graphing offshore looking for spots, I'm like, how the heck did he line up? Do you have like a gimbal mount on your console graph to turn it around so you can see what's going on in the front? Or are you just like, I think it's here, and just sending a prayer with that Carolina rig and catching them? And then it really sounds like to me is moving to the Carolinas and going to college in the Carolinas, right? You've become more of like a Carolina style fisherman, which a lot of those guys are such good jig, shallow
Mm.
water power fishermen, because those big largemouth, from everything I've read and seen, always come from shallower waters in the Carolina reservoir lakes, especially in that clear water.
Yeah.
Like Hartwell, for example, whenever you see a giant come out of Hartwell, it's always a largemouth underneath this shallow dock.
Yeah.
So it's like the growth of the angler that you have seen in yourself in the 4 years
Mhm.
at college is probably crazy compared to where you were back in Jersey to now.
Oh, absolutely. And so a lot of good questions there.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Um, so it's interesting. I feel like I'm a very unorthodox and unique fisherman in that I really am I love finesse fishing. I love downsizing my line. I love all of that. And I'm like fully dedicated and a believer in it. But at the same time, kind of like we're saying, like I'm very, as far as, just what I have resources to, technologically kind of disabled in a way, honestly. Um, so it kind of puts me in this weird place where honestly at heart, I am a shallow water, ultra finessey kind of guy, which in this area really is kind of a weird place to be. And tournaments where that works do line up. It's not frequent, but it absolutely does line up. I mean, I can think about Lake Norman tournaments where everybody's, burning a crankbait in February, catching them, however they catch them, where Trevor, who's in the chat, and I have almost won $10,000 tournaments, throwing a Ned rig on 6-pound tests in the cleanest water in the lake in 2 inches of water. It's a weird kind of way to go about it. But to answer your question about lining up on offshore stuff, I honestly was just throwing out a marker buoy.
The old school orange marker buoy. I love it.
Yeah,
So
so
you
I would simply just line up with the way the wind was blowing at me, cut the motor off at about 120, 100 foot out, chuck that thing out there and sit on top of it and throw straight into the wind. And that's kind of how I do it.
love it. I love it. And I can't wait to talk about like the 96 Ranger here after we get through day three, but how you're going to adjust
Yeah.
to the nice consolation prize that you won besides the Bassmaster Classic, but the pretty much fully rigged out boat. And we're going to dive into that here in a little bit in the
Yeah.
show. But let's jump into day three. From everything that I read, it was a much tougher day on the water. Emotions were high. Going into it, you're sky high. Everything that you did wrong didn't sink you. So your confidence had to have been like through the roof. You're like, I got this. If I can get them to bite that dang whopper plopper and get it good, I'll be okay. So let's dive right into day three from your standpoint in the tournament.
Yeah. I mean, everything you just said is completely accurate. But for some reason, and I don't know if this is a life thing or a tournament thing or what it was, I woke up that morning and just had this kind of, I really don't believe it was nerves because I felt good and confident and, I felt like I was positive and was going to have a good day. And was kind of just as, affirmative in myself and with my buddies and my family that I was going to win it. I had full confidence, but I just had this weird knot in my stomach that it was not going to be easy. It was almost like the day before was too easy. And I was like, you're kidding yourself if you think it's going to be the same, because the day before it was so good that as far as getting big bites that I thought kind of everyone was catching them. And then to come back and be like, whoa, back down to earth, I might have just ran into something today. It's kind of a weird situation. And then I kind of realized that, there's going to be some trials and tribulations. You don't get to the Bassmaster Classic and, win all the crazy stuff that I've been lucky enough to win without a little bit of, rocks in the road kind of a deal. So
nothing like trials and adversity.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It couldn't have been easy. There's just, especially with me, I feel like I'm that kind of person where it can't be easy.
that's fishing, man. That's fishing.
Yeah.
It's never easy, especially when you get into multi-day events.
Yeah.
Because conditions on an hour by hour, second by second standpoint, day by day, are constantly changing. So my first question for day 3, were the conditions different on day 3 than day 2, and how?
Absolutely. And kind of go back on what you said about multi-day tournaments. I was sitting there before we even took off going, like, not upset, but just kind of sitting there like, man, if this is a normal 3-day tournament and weights carried over, I need to catch like 4 or 5 pounds today.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be rolling. So yes, the conditions were different. The wind was howling from the get-go. Not quite like it was on Thursday and Friday, the practice day and then the canceled day. But it was, steadily 10 to 15, at least for the first kind of 3/4 of the day. And it was blowing right on the bank that I'd caught him on the day before. And not really that I had planned to go back there. More so what I kind of planned to do was to just pick up where I left off on that bank and keep going. And the wind it was kind of howling so much that I kind of really couldn't get a good plopper bite going. It was almost too much wind to really get that going. I didn't feel like they could kind of recognize it. So what I ended up doing was try and skip a lot of docks with a chatterbait, which was a dock. It was a bite that I kind of keyed in on, but never really capitalized on, and was dealing with a lot of short strikes. And I don't know. I just didn't feel very, very confident about it. And by, I don't know, it was probably 8, 9 o'clock. I thought I was down the day before. I was like down. I had one in the boat for probably 13, 14 ounces, and that was it. No signs of better bites. Didn't get a better bite. Didn't see anything really convincing. So I did something. I went back to the old trick, right? Hop in the boat, make a run. Only difference is this one, I didn't know where to go. I didn't have a thought of where to go. The wind was kind of messing my deal up, just because in the Carolinas in the fall, it's always a good thing to fish wind. But I felt like the baits that I could throw in the wind, that really heavy wind that I could get a fish to notice and get a bite on, they didn't want to commit to. Chatterbait, spinnerbait. So I was kind of like, I got to find just something different. Ran way up the lake. Not way up, but I don't know.
As far as you could possibly go, is what you're saying.
Probably 3-4 miles. Nothing crazy. Just kind of change of scenery. Rolled up, started fishing down the bank with that chatterbait. Nothing. Saw a dock, and there's a live clip. It's actually pretty cool because Polinick gave me a little credit for it. But I'm going down this bank. There's this dock there, and I've been skipping chatterbait under every dock. And I see this dock, and it's blowing on it, and it's windy, and it's still early. The sun's there's not really a good shade line to get a good jig bite going. I go, you know what? It's probably too early for. I said this out loud. I go, it's probably too early for a jig, but can't hurt to try. Skip under there, catch a pound and a half. It was like, okay.
Like, the intuitiveness is back. It's like, all right, now the lights are going off.
Yeah.
Like, ooh. Then, so what was your process after you're catching that fish on jig? What did you do to switch to the jig bite? Because I know that's what you did on day 3. You fished a jig basically the rest of the duration of the tournament at that point, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I definitely, especially for the next couple of hours, I try to keep a bunch of different things honest. Um, I caught that fish on the jig and I said, you know what? I have not gotten a good jig bite, like a singular, all week. And that was the first one I've got. He ate it, he swam off with it, he had it good. So, maybe there's a jig bite today. But with how random things have been and how random things can be, I kind of kept things honest for a while, kept burning down the bank, and went another hour and a half, 2 hours of nothing. So I went from like optimistic morning, dark, pull up, there's the spark, then 2 hours dark. So it was like starting to just feel weird. And it was probably 45 minutes until the midday break deal. I'm just feeling off. So, you know what I think I got to do right now, I have 2 fish in the boat and no signs of anything else happening. Didn't get another jig bite, then a topwater bite, kind of nothing. I'm going to run to one of my Carolina rig holes and just get a fish in the boat. And I pulled up there, and there it was like pulling teeth. I mean, I dragged for 10 minutes without a bite. And I said, last cast, threw out there, caught like a 12 ouncer. And I was like, okay, you know what? It's a fish. It's number 3. I'm weighing this fish. I'm getting out of here. I just needed that like little something. So I catch that one, roll over to a stretch of docks that had been kind of okay throughout the week. Just it was out of the wind and the sun had started beating on it. And it was actually a dock that I missed a couple fish off of that I felt like were small spots. But I was like, you know what, screw it. I'll pull up on this dock, pull up on it, skip that jig under there. And this was probably 25, 30 minutes before the break. Skip up under there, catch a 2.5 on it. And then I'm like, okay, like now I'm feeling pretty dang good that there is a jig bite. I'm always kind of the person that I kind of need 3 bites to really feel confident about locking a bait in my hand, especially in the fall. In the springtime, you can get 2 bites and be like, you know what, this is something I can roll with. I'm going to put it down and practice. In the fall, I feel like you need like overwhelming evidence to make yourself feel like this is something I can run with. So I got those 2. Hey, what's up, John? I got 2 solid jig bites, a 1.5 and a 2.5. And I'm like, okay, I got to roll with that. Kind of go through the couple more docks, catch my 5th keeper, and then it's break time. So it was like a complete flip from really dark to, we got something going. We have a limit. It was like 6.5 pounds, nothing crazy. But I felt really good going into the break. And one little interesting note about the bracket is most people, if not everybody but me in this tournament, accept a weight update from who they're fishing against. And I never did. I never wanted it and never took it. So there's this break, and I'm sitting there to myself going, okay, you're down. You're down. You need 2 or 3 more good bites, but at least we've got some momentum. Little did I know I was like 4 ounces back. So kind of an interesting dynamic. If you watch back on live, it's really interesting because all day I'm just sitting there going, you're down. You need 1 more bite. You need 2 more bites. Whereas really the whole time I was kind of in it and had no idea. So after fishing that little stretch, I run up the lake, kind of run a couple of different things, just some more like quieter pockets, and then kind of getting back to what I'm really passionate about. And this is where I was like starting to kick myself because like, man, you got sucked into that jig bite. I pull up on a little stretch that I hadn't seen all week. I went as far up the lake as I'd been all week. And weirdly enough, it was cleaner water. That was a whole weird thing that I figured out the last day, but didn't matter.
Interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. But I roll up on this little stretch, don't get any bites the first couple of docks, and then like the 3rd dock in, I'm going, oh, I'm gonna skip a wackier gun on that. Super shallow. I was like, I'm gonna try and get up a little closer to it and get this jig under there. And I start to go a little closer, and 2.5 pounder spooks out from under it. And I'm just like, if you just do what you do, you catch that fish. Like I'm kicking myself. But at the same time, I'm confident there's fish up. So, it was kind of like you screwed up, but there's evidence that you're in an area where there's fish and you're kind of doing the right deal. So I keep going down the bank. And then, dude, it was like another half hour. It's like we're getting like hour and a half left kind of conversations. I'm still sitting on like 6.5 pounds. Um, and I like the demons start creeping in, dude. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, it would be real easy to give up right now. But I kind of, the second is like so bizarre, like the voices in your head throughout a tournament. It's like the second I kind of like said to myself, like, F that, get that out of your head. Like, you're gonna catch them. Next dot, catch a 2.5. Ends up being the winning fish. So it's kind of just wild how it all worked out. If you've seen some of the video or kind of watched the reveal and all that, I ended up catching another one later in the day that called me up a couple more ounces, but I was still very convinced and in my heart, like, knew that I had lost. So it was kind of a wild just ride of emotions that whole last kind of hour. But yeah, no, I ended up getting it done, and it was kind of the purest form of shock that you could have at the boat ramp that day.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. Like the whole tournament fishing aspect too is you never know. Like even if you think you won, usually you lose when you're like, I
Mhm.
got this in the bag, especially in like single day tournaments. But like it's when you have that cast of doubt, you're like, well, it was really tough, but I don't know. I don't think I had enough. And then all of a sudden you're surprised. It's
Yeah,
kind of crazy how it all works out. But Mr. Higgs has a really good question here. He goes, if
yeah,
you don't get any bites on a stretch of docks, do you turn around and go back through or do you head to a new stretch? And it sounds like you kind of just kept powering through in this tournament, but
yeah.
in the general concept, what do you normally do in that situation?
I mean, that is a great question, in that it is so complex and hard to answer. Um, but it's a great question. For me personally, it depends on a couple of things. Um, in the scenario where I don't get any bites, most of the times probably not, unless I saw a fish. Now, it's a totally different story if it's, a tournament that I practiced for and I'd found him on a stretch, gotten a lot of bites off of, especially a tougher one where it's like this was a great stretch for me in practice. I shook off 5 fish here, and I just went down it with the same bait and didn't get a bite. That's something I'm going back on and hitting a lot harder with something way finessier. I will go as finesse as I have to if I don't get any bites on the first pass, and I'm very confident there's still fish there. But man, it's such a feel thing. You find a lot of times that it could be time of day that has fish position on a certain set of docks. It could be wind direction. Um, there's certain times where I'll find a great stretch of docks where I'll either see fish or have gotten bites in the past, or whatever the case may be. But if I roll up in the tournament and fish down them and the wind's blowing in an opposite direction or something, that's kind of a situation where it's like, okay, we're going to wait for the right condition, but right now we can't go back down that stretch because it's just not set up right.
Hmm. Dock fishing, gotta love
Yeah,
it.
it's about as complex a game as it can be, and for someone from the Northeast like myself to really dial it in, um, I honestly haven't. But I feel like I've learned a lot in the last couple of years, and honestly, the best thing I can tell you is that it depends. But I will say that I'm the kind of person that, especially if I feel like they haven't been spooked, and for some reason I either know they're there from visually seeing them, or I feel like from practice they're still there. I'll do just about everything I can if I think they're the winning fish to go back through and try and catch those fish.
Yeah. Have you ever tried a drop shot on a dock?
So yes, it's kind of weird. I growing up north, I like came down here being a drop shot guy. Like, I love to fish a drop shot, whether it be a robo worm or um, God, so many different great drop shot baits out there. But I was a big drop shot guy coming down south, and I don't know what happened, but for some reason, the last 4 years, I've gone from drop shot guy to almost completely Ned rig, wacky rig guy.
Hmm.
I will throw a wacky rig like 12 months out of the year. I I don't know why, but if I don't catch them on a wacky rig, I'll catch them on a Ned rig. I've just become, for some reason, like something about a slow fall bait. Just it feels right to me, and I mean, I will get grossly finesse with a wacky rig to the point where, I mean, I'll throw like a 3-inch wacky rig around in ultra clear, finessey, kind of spooky scenarios. But yeah, no, I used to be a diehard drop shot guy, and for some reason or another, I've really gotten away from it.
Just thought I'd ask. Ned rig, that's I hate throwing a Ned rig, and we do it all the time for smallmouth, and it drives me nuts.
I love it. I don't know why I
No,
love it.
and I don't know why I hate it. It gets a lot of big bites, right? Like
Yeah,
something this big will catch the biggest fish in the lake, and it's just like, what the heck? We had I don't want to say his name wrong. I think it was
wait,
Matt Thompson from Minnesota, and he basically catches lunker in like every tournament that he fishes in Minnesota. And guess what his big fish bait is?
Ned rig.
Ned rig. And he's a ex muskie, like big time muskie angler, which is really funny. Like we're going into it and we're like, oh man, he's catching on like giant baits, and he learned how to like isolate single big bass that come and eat a giant bait. He's like, no, I catch him on a hair jig and a Ned rig. And we're like, what?
Yeah, yeah. It's dude, I don't know what it is about that thing, but especially on smallmouth, it catches big ones.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what it is. I mean, I like to quote unquote brag because it's like the only bait I've ever caught multiple big fish on. But you know, if you don't, for anyone listening, if you don't believe that a Ned rig can be a big fish bait, I think it's the only singular bait that I've caught 5-pound largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass on.
Yeah,
So
it's a tool.
yeah,
And to become versatile, you need to know every tool. So that is awesome. So next thing, right?
yeah,
Bassmaster Classic qualifier. How are you feeling about walking across that big stage? Dreams come true. Like
yeah,
it's like to a bass fisherman, it's like a child wanting to go to Disneyland. Like you're going to the Disneyland of bass fishing, the world
yeah,
championship.
yeah.
You have to be excited.
I am stoked, to say the least. I'm absolutely psyched. You're right. It is a dream. It's a long, ever since I started tournament fishing when I was 13 or 14 years old, it's been just a dream of mine. So honestly, I have it has not set in the slightest. So if I'm being completely honest, I kind of it hasn't hit me that I'm fishing the classic. I've kind of come to terms with the fact that I won the tournament, and I guess I'm sort of somebody in the industry these days. But no,
Humbling.
that I'm starting to, once I started getting W9s and stuff, that was when I was like, oh wait, yeah, I guess this is real. But
Yeah.
not
Love it.
really. The classic part is not real. It is
Not
not
until
hitting me
you're
in the
there, right?
slightest.
And the
It's
media day and all of that nonsense that goes on beforehand. It's a show with a
yeah.
tournament. It's not a tournament. It's a show.
Yeah, and
So
I've been lucky enough to beat it to get at 3 or 4 of them, and, so I just to have been in the crowd and know what it's, kinda like, I can't imagine what it's gonna be like walking across the stage. I will say, Luke Stoner, he's kinda my quote unquote "manager," for the year with dynamic sponsorships. He told me that, he's been doing this a number of years, bunch of college guys, and he said, "Dude, if it hasn't set in yet, it's not going to." He said, "I've been doing this for a couple years now, and every college guy has told me until you walk across that stage, it's not real." So
yeah,
I guess that's kind of what's going to happen.
gotcha. So no, we're gonna talk about the boats real fast before I hit you with
Yeah.
the last question so I can let you get on to the Yankees game because I know you're watching it there in the background, I'm sure. And
I
hopefully
am not, and I have
uh
a feeling, thanks to Trevor's comment,
yeah.
it's a good thing, but
When he
we'll
said that,
see.
I checked. It's 1-0 Guardians, but
Oh, okay,
so
fine,
not. But that's
fine.
like little sidebar. Garrett Cole. It's Garrett Cole, right? The guy
Yeah,
that they paid 300 million to from Houston. I love baseball, but I'm not like individually invested in one team over another. Like
okay.
Albert Pujols walking off and retiring and getting over 700 home runs is just. I'm an overall baseball fan. I love the sport,
Yeah,
but
me too.
Garrett Cole, you're either going to get a really good game out of him in the playoffs or he's going to let 8 home runs happen. So
I know.
you don't know which Garrett Cole you're getting. And I hope for Yankees fans and the 3/4 of the U.S. population that roots for the Yankees, it seems, I hope he
Yeah.
turns it around. But for my grandfather, he's a huge Cleveland Guardians fan when they were the Indians. I don't know if he is anymore. But
Yeah.
I grew up rooting for the Indians, so it's kind of funny. The Buffalo Bisons here were the
Yeah.
Indians farm team, and I got to see, who was it, Manny Ramirez, who was the
Oh
big
my
right
goodness.
fielder. I got to watch him play in Buffalo for like 2 years when he was
Dude, that
here.
is
So
awesome.
it's kind of crazy to think back and look at that when I was like 7 years old.
That
8
is
years old going to
awesome.
Bison's games. But do you think you'll get your seats fixed in your Ranger and fish the Classic out of the Ranger or the Night Best Sweet Nitro that you won?
So I believe
You're kind of
not only
forced.
not only do I think have to fish out of the nitro, but I kind of proclaimed on my way down to Greenwood. I was kind of looking at the old Ranger in the rear view, and it's the only boat I've ever owned that I've ever ran. I was kind of looking at her in the rear view, going, "Man, win, lose, or draw. I'm planning on hitting the Open sometime in the next couple of years. I think this is the last hurrah as far as
The
big
last
tournaments
ride.
go." So I think this past tournament was her ride off in the sunset. That's not to be said that she won't be seen. I'm kind of trying to work on getting her to the Classic in some sort of fashion. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
not
yeah,
too far from you either, from
yeah,
Carolina. So it's like what, 3.5, 4 hours probably
yep,
at most.
exactly,
So yeah, it'll be cool to see the old relic. Are you gonna keep the tarnished seats the same when you bring her up?
absolutely,
Incredible.
absolutely,
Incredible. So like that's just the coolest part is the fact of the Ranger and the boat that you went out. And I'm sure the guys that you're fishing against had like shinier, newer boats. And here comes this guy. And like I said at the beginning, I don't know if I said at the beginning of the show or offline, like just the nostalgia of getting your butt whooped by that guy in the old school boat. It's like, damn. Like that's the easiest way I can put it. So it's just
it's
like, dang.
it is. I mean, even from my perspective, yeah, having a Ranger, a fiberglass 17-foot boat. We got guys in our club at Charlotte that are running aluminum John boats and stuff, and you know they'll roll up and beat your ass.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh yeah, you gotta watch out. Those are the sneaky guys because they'll get in
yeah,
areas that you can't get in and they know what's up. So
yeah,
it's kind of funny how you have to play very coy with those guys that show up. The old school mentality fishermen, they will put a beat down. They might not win every tournament, but when they do, they put a beat down on you.
yeah.
It's kind of
That,
funny.
that's
So
exactly what it is.
before I hit you with the final question, is there anything else you want to hit on while we have you on here, Lewis?
Oh man, it's been a special year. It's been awesome. I kind of can't go anywhere, whether it be on a podcast or show, without thanking a bunch of people. And especially, I got a lot of the Biz Bates crew and the staff, so I got to thank those, or not the staff, in the comments. Shout out those guys. Shout out for Trevor for updating me that we're tied now in the game.
Awesome.
But yeah, no, I mean, just an awesome company that anyone that's kind of listening in, I definitely suggest you guys try out our stuff. I work there now, and everything we make is top notch. And check out these guys, Fat Bass Apparel. They make some awesome clothes that I definitely suggest you guys wear. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Lewis_Monetti. I make some funny memes and try and have a good time on my social media.
Which I should say, I believe down below in the show description, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, all the links to Lewis's social media is there. So you
Sweet.
can circle back and go check it out. So, but final question time that you are not prepped for. Are you ready?
Yeah.
To cue the drum roll. All right. So the question is, from any time in history, from now or before Christ, right? You can choose 3 people, have a steak and a beer, bring them to the dinner table. Doesn't have to be fishing, sports. It could be literally anyone. Who are your 3 people you would bring and why?
Got to be at the same dinner table?
Yeah, all at the same
Mm.
time.
That's a tough one.
Yes, that's why we don't prep you for it.
I like it. I think just because of my addiction / passion to fishing, I have to keep it fishing themed.
Okay.
Although there's definitely some cool baseball and I guess kind of historical figures I could add. But number one is definitely Brian Kirchhoff. He's top of the list for me. I mean, just being a Northeast guy and
Oh yeah.
Having kind of coming from small beginnings and small town dream. I mean, there's no better story in fishing than that. I got to have Ike in there just because he's my guy, Jersey guy. I've been lucky enough to kind of get to know him lately. But he's the man. He's just got to be there. And then I don't know, man. Give me like a Bill Dance. Why not? Yeah, why not?
Tennessee guy,
Just
classic,
kind of
Bill Dance,
the classic stuff. I mean,
good connection.
yeah, I mean, just kind of history. I want to hear some stories about like rolling up to Toledo Bend 5 years after it was dammed. And like, what was that like?
Yeah.
Just some stuff
Without
like
any
that.
like GPS mapping chips, and how many trees took out boat motors and killed
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
Just nuts.
I think that'd be a good conversation. So yeah, those are my three: Kirchhoff, Iconelli, Dance.
Heck yeah, man. That'd be quite the interesting dinner.
It would.
Quite the interesting dinner. Well, I want to say thank you for joining, Lewis. I will let you run now and go catch your Yankees game. I will see you at the Classic. I know I will be there in Knoxville at Fort Loudon, and look forward to meeting you, man. Connecting, and congratulations. Good luck in the Opens next year, because it sounds like that's where you're heading after the big win. And go put on a show at the Classic, man. Show them what old school is all about and the new school Nitro. And
we're gonna try.
We'll be cheering for you, buddy.
Dude, thank you so much. And I'm excited for that. I look forward to meeting you, man.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, you have a good night, and go Yankees.
You too, buddy. I agree.
Man.
Let's go Yanks.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. All right.
See you, buddy. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Awesome show having Louis Monetti on here talking about his college classic bracket championship, heading to the Bassmaster Classic. What a surreal feeling that has to be for him. Just real quick, though, for those who are new here, and if you're still tuned in, please hit the subscribe button down below. The MP3 will be up tomorrow morning. If you are watching on YouTube and you want to re-listen, we will have an episode on Friday. That will be announced on Thursday who it will be, and then another Lure Lab show Saturday morning at 6 a.m. But until next Tuesday night live, have a good night.